A SpaceX rocket just crashed into the moon, and the biggest business story isn't actually about SpaceX. Because while millions of people were looking up at the moon, some businesses were looking at something completely different: attention. And in today's economy, attention can be worth more than almost everything. So, on August 5th, 2026, a roughly 4-ton piece of space hardware slammed into the lunar surface at around 5400 miles per hour. It wasn't a meteor, it wasn't an alien spacecraft, and it wasn't even a functioning rocket. It was the spent upper stage of a Falcon 9 that had been traveling through space since the 2025 mission. And after months of tracking, its trajectory finally intersected with the moon. The moon had just received a delivery from Earth. But here's where this story gets interesting, because the moment that happened, a completely different race began. Not a race to reach the moon, a race to capture attention around the moon. And that's where marketing enters the story. So, this is chapter 1, the crash nobody could ignore. Imagine you are running a marketing department. You wake up, you open your phone, and suddenly, everywhere you look, there's the same story. SpaceX rocket hits the moon. News sites, YouTube, TikTok, X, Instagram, astronomy communities, science channels, podcast, everyone is talking about it. And here's the first lesson: you don't always have to create attention. Sometimes you just need to recognize where attention is moving. That's one of the oldest tricks in the marketing, and it's becoming even more powerful in the internet age. Because when something unexpected happens, millions of people temporarily become interested in a subject they normally don't care about. Someone who has never searched for astronomy suddenly searches how big was the rocket. Someone who doesn't normally watch space videos searches, did SpaceX actually crash into the moon? Someone who has never looked at a telescope thinks, uh, can I see the impact? And that is where businesses start smelling opportunity. This is chapter 2, the attention arbitrage. Think about what happened. A company spends around $100,000 creating an advertisement and hopes people notice it. Another company spends millions sponsoring an event just to get its logo in front of people. But then something happens in the real world, and suddenly millions of people are voluntarily searching for a topic. No advertising budget required. That's what I call attention arbitrage. The world creates, the marketer captures it. And this is where smart businesses can move incredibly fast. Imagine you are a telescope company. You don't need to create the moon, you don't need to create the rocket, you don't even need to create the news. You simply create content around the event. Want to understand what just happened on the moon? Or how telescopes track objects in space? Or 5 things you didn't know about lunar impacts? Now your product isn't interrupting the conversation, your product is part of the conversation. That's a completely different marketing strategy. Chapter 3 is about the business that sells without selling. And this is something most marketers completely misunderstand. You don't always need to say buy our product. In fact, sometimes that's the worst thing you can do. Imagine a company selling astronomy equipment. The internet is suddenly obsessed with the moon. What should they do? They could run an advertisement saying buy our telescope 20% off, or they could create a piece of content titled how scientists track a 4-ton object heading toward the moon. Now people click, they learn, they become curious, they discover the company, and maybe they buy. The difference? The first strategy tries to rent attention. The second strategy tries to earn attention. And earned attention is often much more powerful. So, chapter 4 is about, but there is a dark side. Now, here's where the story changes. Because this isn't simply a marketing opportunity, it's also a warning. The moon is becoming increasingly commercial. Governments governments want to return. Private companies want to land there. Satellites and spacecraft are becoming more common. Businesses are thinking about lunar communications, lunar navigations, mining, manufacturing, tourism, scientific research, and even infrastructure. SpaceX itself has described establishing a lunar company as part of its long term vision, including lunar cargo, crew transportation, and potential manufacturing. But here's the problem: the more businesses enter space, the more business waste enters space too. And suddenly, space junk isn't just an problem, it becomes a business problem. Because imagine spending billions building infrastructure on the moon, only to discover that the environment around it is becoming harder to predict. That creates a completely new industry: tracking, monitoring, collision avoidance, space traffic management, insurance, data, security, and risk analysis. In other words, every new problem creates another market. So, chapter 5 is about the losers. Now, let's talk about the other side. Because not every business wins when attention explodes, some lose. And one of the biggest losers can be reputation. When you are dealing with a company like SpaceX, the product isn't just a rocket, the product is trust. Investors trust the company, customers trust the technology, governments trust the launch provider, partners trust the infrastructure, and the public trust the brand. So, even when something goes wrong, even if that thing wasn't an active mission failure, the story can still become SpaceX rocket crashes into the moon, and that's an important marketing lesson because consumers don't read engineering reports, they read headlines. The technical reality might be a spent upper stage followed an uncontrolled trajectory and eventually impacted the lunar surface. But the headline becomes SpaceX rocket crashes into moon and marketing lives. Inside that gap, the gap between what happened and what people believe happened, that's why reputation management is so important. Chapter 6 about the real bill isn't always money. Here's something fascinating. When people hear the word loss, they immediately think money. But businesses can lose something much more valuable, that is, trust. A company can lose customer confidence, investor confidence, government confidence, brand credibility, and sometimes years of reputation can disappear in a single viral moment. That's why the best companies don't just ask, how do we prevent failures? They also ask, what happens when the world sees us fail? Because eventually, every company will have a bad day. The difference between a strong brand and a weak brand is what happens next. Chapter 7, the businesses that will make money from the chaos. Now, here's the part I find most interesting. This moon crash could be a preview of something much bigger. Because if lunar activity keeps increasing, we are going to need an entire ecosystem of businesses around it. Think about Earth. We didn't just build roads, we built gas station, insurance company, GPS, traffic system, repair shops, logistics companies, restaurants, hotels, advertising networks, payment systems. Entire industries appeared because an ecosystem appeared. The moon could eventually follow a similar pattern. And the first companies to make money may not be the companies actually building rockets. They may be the companies building the infrastructure around the rockets. That's the opportunity. Chapter 8 is about the marketing lesson. So, what does a rocket crashing into the moon have to do with marketing? Everything. Because marketing isn't simply advertising, marketing is understanding. What are people paying attention to? Why are they paying attention? What emotion is driving that attention, and most importantly, where is that attention going next? When something unexpected happens, most businesses watch, smart businesses analyze, and exceptional businesses act. They don't exploit tragedy, they don't manufacture misinformation, they don't blindly jump on every trend. They find a legitimate connection between the event and the value they provide. That's the difference. Final chapter of this video will be the moon is the warning. For thousands of years, humans looked at the moon and saw a symbol, a mystery, something impossibly far away. But today, businesses are looking at it differently. They are seeing infrastructure, transportation, communication, resources, science, tourism, and eventually perhaps an economy. And that's why this little piece of metal hitting the moon matters. Not because it destroyed the moon, it didn't. Not because it threatened people on Earth, it didn't. And not because SpaceX suddenly lost billions because of this one attack. That's not the story. The story is what happens when human activity reaches a place that used to be untouched. Because every new frontier creates opportunity, and every new frontier creates problem. And where there's a problem, there's usually a business waiting to solve it. The rocket crashed into the moon, but the bigger collision may have been between technology, business, and human attention. And if you think this is just a space story, look again. Because the next $1 trillion industry might not be built on Earth, it might be built around it. The future belongs to the businesses that see the opportunity before everyone else does. This is Marketing Vanguards, where we don't just study marketing, we study the strategies changing the game. Thank you so much.